Welcome to the latest episode of the Visa Hour. Today, we'll discuss what American Citizen Services, or ACS, can do for you.
To join, you can submit your questions by posting them on Twitter using the hashtag #TheVisaHour or by posting them on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Manila US Embassy, or you can also do it via our Google Plus page, which is google.com/plus US Embassy Manila.
Hi everyone, I'm Lori, and I'm joined by my colleagues from the consular section, and we're here to answer the questions that we gather online.
I'm Lindsay. This is my first time in the Philippines, and I've tried a lot of Filipino food, but I haven't yet tried balut.
Hi, I'm Monique. I've been in the Philippines for about a year, and my favorite Filipino food is champorado.
Oh, that's a good one. All right, so we have a great show for you today. Let's get started. First, we'll talk about an important topic for all of us out there who are international travelers: passports.
Angela Morales Baldonado on Facebook asks, may I know where to find the documents in applying for a U.S. passport? Well, we'll get there in just a sec, but before we move on, I just want to remind everyone that the State Department no longer offers additional visa pages.
Okay, which brings us to a question from April from Facebook, and she writes a private message asking, "Hi ACS, I learned that you've just stopped adding visa pages and I'm really disappointed. Isn't there anything you can do to make things easier for us Americans living abroad in the Philippines?"
So it sounds like passport renewals is something that a lot of people have a question about. And actually, we have some really exciting news about passport renewals, which will hopefully make renewing your U.S. passport a simpler and easier process. So U.S. citizens renewing their adult passports by mail now have the option of including payment with the mail-in application. In order to choose this application, remember to obtain a demand draft in U.S. dollars issued by the Bank of the Philippine Islands, BPI, in the amount of $110 made out to U.S. Embassy Manila. You can include that along with your passport renewal documentation.
That's great news. And actually, perhaps we should clarify for our viewers, because we just received a message from Hector on email. He doesn't have BPI. Can he pay for his renewal with a personal check?
Oh, that's a great question. Unfortunately, right now, you can't. We don't accept demand drafts from any bank other than BPI, and we don't accept any other financial instruments like personal checks. Hopefully in the future, but for now, we're going to go with the demand drafts from BPI. Remember, you still have the option, though, of paying for your passport renewal in person or through a representative at the U.S. Embassy or at our consular agency in Cebu.
But remember, before you apply for your passport service, visit our website. There you can print out a handy-dandy passport checklist to make sure you don't forget any of the required items. Hopefully that answered all of your questions related to passports. Our next topic is notarials and the types of things the embassy can notarize. If you have a document to be used for legal purposes in the U.S., you might need to come to the U.S. Embassy to require some notarization services.
This is a really great service, but there are a few important things that our clients have to keep in mind, right, Lori?
Definitely. First and foremost, services are by appointment only. And unfortunately, as some Americans have learned the hard way, we can't just accommodate walk-in customers. Second, please remember that we can't certify the truthfulness of your document. What we're doing here at the embassy is we certify that you signed it in front of us and that you have sworn or affirmed under oath that the contents are true. That is all.
Oh, I think it's time for another question. John from California writes, I'm coming to the Philippines next month to get married, and I heard that there's something that I need called the legal capacity to marry. What is it, and can I get this from the U.S. Embassy?
This is such a great question. Thanks for asking. It's actually one of the documents that we notarize the most here at ACS Manila. So in order to get married in the Philippines, you need to provide a certified record of no marriage to prove that you're legally capable or legally free to marry. And now that's something that's unique to the Philippines. We're not used to that in the States because unlike other countries, we don't have a central marriage index. So some city halls will require you to provide a legal capacity to marry in order to show that you are legally free to marry.
So will our friend John be good to go once he gets his legal capacity to marry affidavit?
Well, hopefully, and maybe, but we should actually warn you that some certain city halls, some bar and guides don't actually accept that document. So if you want to get married here, we recommend that you reach out to the city hall or the local civil registrar in the place where your fiance is from to make sure that you understand and can meet all of the requirements. Of course, aside from American Citizen Services, there's other agencies at U.S. Embassy Manila that can help U.S. citizens residing in the Philippines.
First, let's dive into a quick reminder from the Social Security Agency. As you might know, the fastest and easiest way to file for Social Security benefits. Did you know that there are hours of operation that you should keep in mind?
Oh, that's actually really important, especially with the time change. What are the hours, Monique?
Okay, so the SSA is opened a lot, actually. They're open on weekdays, weekends, and even holidays during the hours that are scrolling below. Just as a reminder, we're 13 hours ahead of the East Coast right now, so it would be best to call during the evening, our time here in the Philippines.
Right. Good point. And it looks like we actually have another question from one of our viewers. Daryl is writing, can I apply for more than my Social Security retirement benefits online?
Oh, you sure can. You can apply for retirement, Medicare, and disability all online. Grab a pen because the important websites are scrolling right now along the bottom of your screen, so please write them down.
Well, that's an incredibly helpful information for our viewers. Why don't I fill everyone in on our other colleagues here at the embassy and what they can do for them?
Great idea. How about our friends at the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services, or USCIS?
So the most important reminder we would like to give folks at home about the services they can get at the embassy from USCIS, it is regarding their applications for immediate relatives.
Can they file those applications right here at the embassy?
Yep, exactly. So basically, for those that reside in the Philippines, they can start the immigration process here at the embassy.
What if people don't reside in Manila? Is there anything else that they could do?
There are convenient outreaches that we have throughout the course of the year. So you can come to the embassy and apply, or you can send your application into the embassy here, but you also can apply with USCIS when they go to these outreaches.
Oh, you can avoid Manila traffic? That sounds great. But how can I find out more about the outreaches?
Yep, you can enroll in our Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. We call it the STEP program. So this program enables you to receive important information from the embassy, such as the date, time, and location of our outreaches. It's easy and free to enroll through travel.state.gov.
So when will the next outreach be held?
So the next one is actually scheduled for Bacolod and Iloilo this month, February 22nd to February 24th. So if you're living in that area or nearby and that's convenient to get to, you should definitely try to check it out. You don't need to apply in advance. You can just show up on the day of the outreach.
We hope to see you there. So let's get back to immigration. I know you were saying something about immediate relative petitions. Is that the only thing I can apply for, or what is that?
Well, so let me just explain that a little bit. If you're applying for your family, specifically your spouse, your children, or your parents, those are your immediate relatives. And that's an application that you can fill out and submit here at the U.S. Embassy Manila to USCIS. So it's important that you not forget that you can always access information from USCIS online. Their website is really helpful, www.uscis.gov, but they also have a public inquiry email address, which is available, I believe, scrolling on the bottom of the screen. So if you have additional questions that require some extra answers that we weren't able to get to today, feel free to write to them there and they'll be able to answer your questions.
I think another thing to say right now, American Citizen Services, we're not immigration experts, and we're not the visa units. So actually there's a question that just popped up that's a perfect segue to this. On Facebook, Vivian C. Guingab writes, "Hello, have a great morning. Just wanted to ask how we present ourselves as being a guest for visa at the U.S. Embassy. Thanks a lot." And this really does sort of go to a confusion that a lot of people have, I think, about what American Citizen Services does.
Right. Because there's a lot of Americans here and the people that they love here, potentially applying for immigrant visas or non-immigrant visas. But in ACS Manila, we don't answer visa questions, and we would encourage you to visit other visa hours where our colleagues at the consular section maybe have answered the questions, or feel free to reach out to our colleagues at their website here, or at their email address for non-immigrant visas or immigrant visas.
And additionally, you can also go to the U.S. Embassy website and visit the non-immigrant visa section, and schedule your appointment there and get all of the information you may need about your particular case.
So now let's move on to our next topic. Voting. I'm sure many of you are watching the Democratic and Republican debates and eager to exercise your right to vote. In fact, many of you have written in already regarding the process of voting, so we're here to answer your questions.
If you're a U.S. citizen living abroad, the prospect of casting your vote or expressing your opinion seems a bit daunting, but luckily voting is now much simpler for all of us overseas, thanks to the Military Overseas Vote, or MOVE Act, which was passed by Congress in 2009. In fact, most of the process can be done online at the Federal Voting Assistance Program website.
Okay, that sounds great, but what's the first step we should take to get a ballot overseas?
Well, first you should go to the FVAP website and complete a new federal postcard application, which is FPCA. This application is your tool to both register to vote and request your ballot.
Speaking of voting, I see a question from Oliver in Baguio on Facebook. He asks, is this registration process only for the presidential elections in November?
That's a great question. Actually, the good news is that the FPCA allows you to vote and allows you to request absentee ballots for not only the presidential election in November, but also Senate races, House of Representative races, and also includes primaries and special elections.
So when our viewers complete their FPCA, how do they submit it?
Well, there are some different possible options. You could submit it via mail, via fax, or via email. But the most important thing to keep in mind is, depending on the state in which you live, there might be different requirements. So it's important to refer to the website of the state in which you are a resident to find out what the instructions are for your specific state. Some states will accept email, but oftentimes they won't.
Mm-hmm. So that doesn't sound too painful, but how long does it take to get the ballot?
Oh, I'll take this one. States are required to send out ballots 45 days before a regular election for federal office and 30 days before a primary election. Once you receive your ballot, you should also follow your state's instructions, as Lindsay said, about how to submit it. Again, some states accept it electronically, others by regular mail, or others by fax. So you want to pay really close attention to that.
And get on this early. It'd be a shame if you missed out just because you requested your ballot too late.
Mm-hmm. So I can see actually that we have a question from Bob in Makati. He says, I live close by. Can't I just come to the U.S. Embassy to vote?
Oh, well, unfortunately, you can't cast your vote at the embassy itself, but we will mail it for you through the U.S. diplomatic pouch at no cost. You can drop it by the consular section Monday through Friday during our business hours, which are 7:30 to 4:30 p.m., but make sure that your ballot is in an envelope that's addressed to your local election official, and it also should have U.S. postage on the envelope.
Okay, so that was a lot of information. It does seem pretty easy, but for our viewers at home, who can they contact if they have questions, as now they're trying to get everything together to register?
Okay, well, you'll find most of the answers to your questions at the FVAP website. It's really a great website. It'll answer most of your questions, and you can also email the voting assistance officer here at the U.S. Embassy at votemanila@state.gov. Okay, now let's move on to another important subject, travel and security. Since so many of us live in or travel frequently to the Philippines, let's discuss State Department resources that can provide you with valuable information for your travels.
Did you know that the State Department has a website with up-to-date, useful information about the Philippines? This website is travel.state.gov, and it's a great resource for anyone who is thinking of traveling to or who is living in the Philippines, or maybe just has questions because they have family members who live in the Philippines or will be traveling here as well.
Something to keep in mind, though, is that the travel.state.gov website, although a great resource, is a little bit confusing. When you arrive at the homepage, what you'll have to do in order to go to the Philippine-specific information, which is I know what all of you are interested in, is sort of go to the lower left-hand corner and type in the Philippines under country-specific information, click Go, and you'll be able to access the Philippines country-specific information page that has a lot of valuable information on it. Lori, can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of information our viewers might be able to find on that page?
Sure. So for example, you can learn about exit and entry requirements, visa requirements, or any questions regarding currency or safety and security. More importantly, though, you can view the State Department's travel warning. So this is an advisory to all U.S. citizens regarding the risks of traveling to certain areas in the Philippines, such as Mindanao, because it's really important to keep informed. And this is our way of giving you the resources so you can stay safe.
That's great. Speaking of the travel warning, can you talk a little bit about something that might have recently changed in the travel warning?
So in September of 2015, we actually had to update our travel warning because there was a kidnapping on Samal Island. So we issued another travel warning to remind all of our U.S. citizens that general threats to U.S. citizens and foreigners throughout Mindanao continue to remain a concern.
So besides reading the travel warnings, what other things can U.S. citizens do to stay safe?
Well, they can enroll in that Smart Travel Enrollment Program, or STEP, which I know that Lori mentioned before regarding the outreaches. But STEP can also be a really important resource to staying safe in an emergency. It allows the U.S. Embassy to get in contact with you during an emergency or some sort of crisis, and also can help your friends and family get in touch with you as well. The best part, it's free. So really everybody should do it in order to keep as safe as possible when traveling abroad, not only to the Philippines, but wherever in the world you may travel.
Because it's just vitally important that U.S. citizens, wherever you guys are here in the Philippines, that you know the right information during emergencies, and that's how we can get it out to you.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Philippines is subject to a variety of natural disasters, such as earthquakes, typhoons, and volcanoes.
And I know that for some people, it might be really difficult to think about these things, but in our opinion, it's best to be prepared, and that's the most important thing. So we encourage everyone to have a plan in place in the event that a natural disaster strikes. You can work with your local barangay to know where you might need to go in the event of an emergency, where there might be shelters where you could go or evacuation points that might be safe in the event of a typhoon or an earthquake.
Like to know where the higher ground might be or anything like that.
Exactly.
So a couple of easy tips that we have are to have some bottles of water in the house ready to go and some non-perishable food in what we call a go bag. That'll help you in the event that food and water become scarce following some sort of a disaster. The best part is that it just gets you through those initial days without kind of causing you a lot of angst and turmoil about the bare necessities in life while you're dealing with a lot of other things.
And if you make a go bag, you should definitely be sure to remember to keep enough supplies for your entire family.
Yeah. If you're interested in actually finding out more information about how to prepare for all of this, you'll find more information on disaster preparedness on our website. So when you go to the U.S. Embassy Manila website, you'll click on American Citizen Services, and right there in a link on the left-hand side is disaster preparedness. Click on that hyperlink, and there's a ton of information for you about how to prepare so that you just are ready in case anything happens.
There's also some good resources about what are the agencies in the Philippines that you might be able to consult in case there's an emergency. PAGASA, which is the weather agency, their website address is there, along with other sorts of resources that might be useful for you, especially living in the Philippines. Again, it never hurts to be overly prepared.
So in addition to natural disasters, we find that Americans here in the Philippines face other daily emergencies, such as when they become victims of car accidents or crime. And here at the embassy, we have someone who can help you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to help you with your emergencies.
And we can assist in getting people in touch with hospitals, attorneys, police departments, or other sorts of resources that might be difficult for you to navigate on your own. One important thing to keep in mind, however, is I know that a lot of U.S. citizens sometimes call the U.S. Embassy looking for legal counsel. And of course, our recommendation is always, if you run into legal trouble here in the Philippines, your best resource is a local attorney, because a local attorney knows the legal system here in the Philippines, might have the connections that you need to best navigate the legal system. And while we have a list of attorneys on our U.S. Embassy website, that list is not a U.S. Embassy recommendation. It's a list of attorneys who've offered their services to U.S. citizens, but the U.S. Embassy can't recommend a particular attorney on that list.
Exactly. And if you call with a legal issue, we're going to point you right to that list. So if you have something come up and you kind of just want some advice about it, we unfortunately, like we mentioned earlier, can't give the legal advice, but that's a really great resource for you to access on our website. But let's go back to what Monique was talking about before. If I was in the U.S. and my family member was sick here in the Philippines, could I call the duty officer and get help? Or?
Yeah, you can call. We have a duty officer that works during non-work hours, including on the weekends, and he or she will do their best to help you out in an emergency that you're experiencing.
That's great. But what about for something that's not an emergency? Say if you lose your passport, which I know unfortunately happens to some people when they travel. In ACS, we much prefer for non-emergency situations that our U.S. citizens wait until the next day and come to the ACS section during working hours. And this is not to say that losing your passport doesn't feel like a real emergency to you. Of course, it's always traumatic when something out of the ordinary happens during your travels. But if it's not a life or death emergency, we can provide you the best service if you come to ACS during working hours, which again are 7:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday.
So unfortunately, we kind of do have to talk a little bit about limitations regarding this, because we can't help in every single circumstance that comes up. Like, for instance, if you were to have to be in a hospital and accrue a lot of medical bills, that's something that happens here because medical care is actually quite expensive. We can't pay medical bills. And the other thing that we can't do is get involved in private matters or legal matters. So if you have a dispute with a neighbor, or if you feel like you were wronged in some way, we can only refer you to that list of attorneys that we mentioned before, or other agencies here. We can't really get involved in those personal matters. We can connect you with your friends and your family back at home, or a bank in case you needed to access some money. And actually, just quickly, speaking of medical bills, it's a good reminder to everybody that you might want to look into having some travel insurance before you come to the Philippines.
It's a great reminder.
It's surprising how quickly hospital bills can become almost insurmountable or unaffordable for people. So keep that in mind if you're planning a trip. You might want to make sure that you have that taken care of. But again, we apologize that there are some limitations. We can't solve all of your problems here, but we can hopefully point you in the right direction, or get you in touch with your family members so that you can better solve your problems.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, Lori. And just remember, we're here to help you navigate the nuances of living in the Philippines. And we all know that being Americans overseas, things can get a little confusing sometimes.
And you know what, actually, based on what I was saying before, this might be a really good time to bring up the Privacy Act.
Yeah, I think a review would be great.
Okay, so the short story is that here in ACS Info Manila, we can't release any information about people without their consent. So if you're calling to check up on your brother, on your mom, on your cousin, or your ex-girlfriend, we aren't able to release any information. If we do have it, we can't give it out to you without their consent. So basically what we need to do is obtain permission from that family member who's here in the Philippines, who you're looking in on. We need to get their permission prior to discussing anything regarding their life, what they're doing here, or where they're located.
And it sounds tricky, but it's actually quite easily solved with a document called a Privacy Act waiver. And that's a document that a U.S. citizen can sign, simply stating that the U.S. citizen gives us, ACS, permission to talk to whoever they list, mom, dad, brother, ex-girlfriend, agencies including Social Security or Veterans Affairs, for example, if you have questions about your benefits. Or else you can also sort of give blanket approval. You could check that we could talk to all friends and family, or any congressperson, exactly. But that document is really important for us and for you. It's for your protection as a U.S. citizen, allowing us to share information only with those individuals that you consent to.
So once we get that waiver, we're able to then reach back out to you and freely discuss what's going on with your loved one here in the Philippines. But the better option actually is that we could even pass along contact information. So if you reach us and you're telling us that you're concerned about a family member and you want to know where they are, we can try to help find that family member, but depending on certain circumstances. And if we're able to get in touch with them, we can just pass along your message that you're just wanting them to get in touch. And then we can help connect you guys, and we can kind of step back from what's going on.
Oh, we have a question from Google. Paul Anglin asks, this will be my first time visiting the Philippines. Do I need a visa if I'm only going to be there for a month?
That's a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Well, it's tricky because there is a time period that you can be here without a visa. It's 30 days. So since you're saying you're only going to be here for a month, you might be on the cusp, and you might want to just double check your dates and check with immigration once you get here, because there is some time that you can come in without a visa, but there is a cutoff, and you do need to obtain a visa if you're going to stay longer than 30 days.
Yeah, this is actually a great reminder to U.S. citizens. If you're traveling to the Philippines, you're having a great time, you decide you want to stay for a month, 2 months, longer, one of the most important things that we recommend our U.S. citizens to do is to reach out to the Bureau of Immigration or go on their website to find out what you need to do to stay in status.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't stay in status, then there's a possibility that you might not be allowed to leave the country, or there might be hefty fees that you have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And just to avoid that situation, if you can just maintain the status on your visa and update your visa regularly, you should do that. And in larger cities, oftentimes there's a Bureau of Immigration or BI satellite office that might be able to do simple visa extensions right there. You wouldn't necessarily have to come back to Manila even to do that.
Mm-hmm. One thing to actually keep in mind about that is that if you're here already and you're confused because you have maybe overstayed or you didn't know about the 30 days or that you might need a visa, come on in and actually come and talk to us, and we can help give you information on where BI is and what you need to do. We can kind of help you figure out an estimate of how many fees you've accrued so that you can kind of get an understanding and potentially repay those fees so that everything can kind of be settled with your visa, and then you can be in legal status. Because it's unfortunate if you're here and if anything arises, you just want to make sure that you have everything taken care of with your immigration matters, because we've seen things go a little bit south for people. So if you have questions, we can definitely help point you in the right direction regarding visa matters if you need to come into the embassy to talk to us. Okay. We have another question.
So it looks like we have another question on Facebook. Ralph Mata asks, can I make an appointment as a U.S. citizen here in Manila? I just have some questions regarding my situation.
Well, I think we might need to know a little more about what kind of appointment you would need. But we basically have a window that for every day, if American citizens have some sort of an emergency or an issue, or like I just brought up, if you have questions and you need some help getting the right information about the Bureau of Immigration, you always can come to the embassy, and we're always here to listen to your questions. We have great members on our team who will help kind of triage questions. Sometimes you'll talk to an officer. Sometimes you won't need to talk to an officer because our team members have awesome information. They've been doing this work for a long time. So you're welcome to come into the embassy and pose your question during our work hours, which is 7:30 until 12.
Mm-hmm. You can also email us any questions at our email, which is acsinfomanila@state.gov. And I'll just repeat that again, acsinfomanila@state.gov.
It looks like we have a third question. A question comes from Kyra Joy De Leon on Facebook, and she says, please give us an idea of how to deal with the dual citizenship situation of my child. What is the process and how can I do it?
Okay, so we can't really speak from the Philippines side of the equation. But from our side of the equation, we have a lot of information on our website about how to document your U.S. citizen child. And our previous visa hour was actually all about that topic. The entire hour was dedicated to it. So there's a lot of information. It's a little bit nuanced. Some people a gentleman today told me that it was harder to get citizenship to fill out the forms than it was for him to get a job, to fill out job applications back in the States. So it can get a little bit tricky and might seem a little daunting, but go to our website because we have a really, really good checklist there with a ton of information that if you follow that checklist, you will have everything prepared and ready for when you finally submit that document. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's a really good resource that you just gave. And then for the other direction, again, like Lori said, we can't really give much information about the dual citizen process going the other way. For example, if you have a U.S. citizen child and you're trying to get his or her Filipino citizenship. But one thing we do tell our consular report of birth abroad, or CRBA parents, when they come in for interviews and we approve their child's U.S. citizenship, is if your child is already a Filipino citizen and is being documented as a U.S. citizen, just double check with the Bureau of Immigration after you receive your child's passport to make sure there aren't any certain exit clearances that are needed before your child travels on the U.S. passport for the first time. So just a little tidbit to keep in mind. But again, like Lori said, we'd refer you to our entire visa hour dedicated to consular report of birth abroad for more information.
And you can find that visa hour on our website through YouTube. So we encourage you to look at that. So now we're going to move on to our next topic, which is taxes. And this is going to be a lot of fun. But fair warning, we're not tax experts.
No. Okay.
Although
so,
we do all pay our taxes.
Yeah. Okay. So we actually already have a question from Joe in Quezon City. So he says, I am a U.S. citizen, but I don't even work in the United States. Do I really need to file taxes?
Okay, that's a really good question. Of course, each individual's situation is different, but in general, if you're a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident living overseas, you are required to file U.S. federal income taxes while you're living overseas.
Oh, it looks like we have another question here. This one's from Antonio in Cebu City via Facebook private message, and he's asking, I'm a U.S. citizen working as a contractor in the Philippines, and my wife is a permanent resident in the U.S. May I file a joint return with her?
Well, Antonio, unfortunately, we can't offer tax advice. As we mentioned, we're not tax experts, we're not tax lawyers. However, we do have some really useful information for international taxpayers. The IRS has a website and phone line dedicated specifically to international taxpayers, which you should be able to see scrolling below. And you can check there to ensure that you're complying with particular things that relate to U.S. citizens abroad, such as the Foreign Tax Compliance Act, or FACTA, and the Foreign Bank Financial Reporting. You might have heard of FBAR. These requirements you'll find further information there.
And so basically, it's a little bit tough, right? Because we'd love to talk about taxes. We aren't tax experts, but we really just need to get the point across that you do need to be paying your taxes, that there is a website dedicated specifically to people who are living overseas and working and who need to pay their taxes back in the States. So it's important to note that if you don't pay your taxes, that actually ends up being an issue. So it's really, we kind of urge you to go and check out that website, so that the IRS website for international travelers, because that'll help line you up so that you're ready for this tax season come April.
And it seems like we might have a little bit of time left, so I just thought maybe we could bring up some other topics that sometimes come up in ACS that people might be wondering about. I'm thinking actually about something that we ask for a lot when we're doing passports, and sometimes people are confused about what this is. So I thought maybe we could talk about it.
What do you think?
Growing up picture.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah. So what's a growing up picture? Or a sequential photo, as we sometimes refer to them as.
So sometimes people have heard that we require these for school-age children, but actually, oftentimes people get their first passport when they're a baby, and then that expires 5 years later. So we're looking at someone who is a baby and now a 5-year-old, and without any photos in between, we don't have any idea of if this 5-year-old was actually that baby. So if that circumstance arises, or if it applies to your family, we require photos to show from baby to 5 years old. And when they're a baby, kind of every 6 months until maybe 2, 3, 4, 5. So we suggest birthday photos. That's like an easy way to kind of keep track of how they've progressed over the years. And if you come to your interview with that ahead of time, we'll be able to approve your passport much sooner, because sometimes we have to delay the approval of passports because we just need to make sure that we see those photos.
Yeah, it's really just an identity issue. And the same can come about if you are someone who's changed dramatically in the past 10 years, even though you're an adult. For example, say you lost a lot of weight, which congratulations, that's great news. But you might look really different now that you lost all that weight. So we just want to make sure that you're the same person. The identity of a U.S. passport holder is extremely important. We don't want people who are not U.S. citizens to be able to gain access to these important U.S. travel documents. So because of that, we just might ask for the photos. Unfortunately, we don't allow you to email those pictures in just because of the size of the files. Sometimes they clog up our email box, but photocopies are fine. Just send them into our mailing address as listed on the letter that you'll receive, and we'll be able to adjudicate those applications right away after that.
Yeah, and also bear in mind that when you come to the embassy for your appointment, you are not able to bring your cell phone. So we often have people who may have photos on their cell phone or their smartphone, and we're not able to view that when we meet you. So we would encourage you, again, as Lindsay said, to print them out in advance and bring them to your appointment.
That was great. And we actually have a comment from Jomar C. Bondad. And he just wants to say, God bless U.S. Embassy.
Well, thank you so much. That's a really nice comment.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it looks like we want to just thank all of all of the people who have submitted questions to us. Angela Morelos, Vivian Guingab, Paul Anglin, Ralph Mata, Kyra Joy De Leon, Joe, Hector, Antonio, and Jomar Bondad. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So unfortunately, we don't have enough time to answer all of your questions, but you may post them and any visa questions on the visa wall of our Facebook page at http://visa wall. And of course, don't forget to visit our visa blog, Be Satisfied Voyager, at blogs@usembassy.gov Philippines.
You can watch the on-demand version of this episode on our YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/US Embassy Manila.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/manila.US Embassy, and follow us on Twitter as well, twitter.com/US Embassy Manila.
Please also add us to your circles on Google Plus at google.com/plus US Embassy Manila.
And finally, check us out on Instagram at US Embassy Manila.
Again, thank you for joining us this month, and see you next month for the next episode of the Visa Hour. Bye!